Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the potential of the various front runners to succeed Rishi Sunak after the election. Because the more I look at that list of front runners, according to bookies odds that is, the more I think they just don't have anyone. It's not just that they're all poor, it's that each of them has some aspect to their character or politics which would ordinarily completely rule them out of contention. And yet they've got to pick someone. It's why the Tories stuck by Sunak so long after it was obvious he didn't have a clue. There was simply nobody better. That fact will not change with the election. But before I go down the list, just a little note. So you may have been expecting me to be discussing the TV debate from last night. Unfortunately, I'm in London today. Had to set off in the early hours. Unfortunate, but I had a pre-arranged event booked before Rishi Sunak decided to call the election, but this is the last one. Should be able to discuss the others coming up over the next few weeks. But anyway, book his favourites to replace him. Top of the list is Kemi Badenoch, another inexperienced MP who would not be in cabinet at all now if it weren't for Michael Gove's patronage. Quite why Gove has backed her so strongly is anyone's guess. She has been a qualities minister for a long time, yet seems to think the role is for rolling back equal rights. Of course, this isn't a barrier to success in the Conservative Party, but her stated views are unlikely to win lots of the support that the Conservatives have been losing. Sunak has made a huge error in chasing after Reform UK type voters instead of the usual swing voter targets. Where the Conservatives in general have clearly gone badly wrong in their post-Brexit years is in chasing away moderate One Nation Conservative voters. They only held on to them in 2019 because of the greater fear of Jeremy Corbyn. It does not seem that Badenoch even cares about appealing to these voters, much less has the capacity to do so. I saw some recent polling. I think it was from Opinion. It shows that Sunak is way more likely to win back undecided voters who are round the centre than Reform UK voters. And a lot of these undecided voters will be Liberal Conservatives who are not at all impressed by the culture wars. And yet Badenoch only offers two things, culture wars and faking the projected benefits of various Brexit trade deals, but they never come. So in terms of what she'll actually deliver, nothing at all. But there's a much bigger problem with Badenoch. After all, fantasy politics can survive for way longer in opposition than government. A lot of the Tories' ridiculous policies like the Rwanda plan have ultimately failed, not because they were rubbish policies, not because they didn't sound appealing enough, but because they were in a position to implement them, and of course they don't work. They may have been able to win votes with a scheme like this if they were in opposition not actually implementing it. So unrealistic policies are only a problem when you're in a position to deliver. But Badenoch is irritable, which is a far bigger problem. She was doing the interview round again earlier this week, and she was being asked about her party's latest attempt to demonise trans people. And during one interview on the BBC, she even seemed to be describing rape as a trivial matter. Oh, you think Sunak is bad at politics? Yeah, the man's a guru compared to this fool. I've seen commentators on the right, even those who are no strangers to culture wars themselves, still saying that this focus on culture wars right now is not a great strategy. Labour are making major announcements every day as they build up to their manifesto launch. On Monday, they had veterans standing as Labour candidates and were talking about Labour's defence policy. Even some on the right are tearing their hair out that on the same day Labour were talking about the defence of the realm, the Tories were talking about toilets. But this is the sort of thing the Tories would carry on doing under Badenoch. She has no more political acumen than Sunak, maybe less, but her character is more volatile. It was clear that what she expected of the interviewers was to let her say her piece, then say how great the policy is, and then she could move on to the next interview. But she was asked questions. And every time she was asked a question which poked holes in her argument, she got very touchy. This, remember, is the same Kemi Badenoch who decided to pick a fight with the Speaker of the House of Commons. Oh, he proper blew up at her. There have been other petulant Tories, Johnson and Sunak chief amongst them, but they usually understand how to pick their battles. When the Speaker pulls them up, they apologise, say, "Oh, sorry, didn't mean it," and then carry on anyway because there's nothing the Speaker can really do about it. But they at least give a show of, "Oh, sorry, didn't mean it." But Badenoch decided to pick a fight with him. She hasn't got a diplomatic bone in her body. She not only hates being told she's wrong, she will battle you every time to do it. This is not a useful quality in political leadership. Even some pretty dreadful political leaders, as I say, have understood when to pick your battles. If enough of the Tory MPs who are left after the election realise this, then despite being the bookie's favourite, she would surely lack the support needed to even make it on the ballot for members. And if not enough Tory MPs do realise that her combustible nature is a problem, they soon will when they make her leader. Can't see her lasting a full parliament. Next favourite's Penny Mordaunt. Now, I could talk about the fact that although she comes across better in public, she is known even by Tory MPs to be vain and lazy. There's a reason she's never been allowed to run a government department for more than a few months. The only reason she's in cabinet now is to be in charge of photocopying the House of Commons order papers. But in a field of the hopeless, you couldn't rule out Mordaunt standing a chance. Except, of course, she's really unlikely to be in a position to do so because she's probably going to lose her seat at the election. Doesn't stop her biding her time, of course, coming back to Parliament, either in a by-election or a future election, and leading the party at some point in the future. But in the immediate aftermath of the election, she's unlikely to be able to stand. No idea why she's second favourite with the bookies. Third is Priti Patel. Now, arguably, some of her worst traits are less of a problem in opposition. There's no civil servants to bully. The fact that she's incompetent, also less of an issue. She's also been neatly sidestepping all of the current infighting. She's not really been taking part in that, as far as I can tell from the outside, suggesting that she would stand a better chance than most of claiming to be the unity candidate. Unity candidates are always a popular choice, particularly when your party's in a mess. When you've been on the receiving end of a right hiding in the election, especially. She very much represents the right of the party, of course. I don't think the One Nation Tories would expect Brexit pragmatism from her. But when you look at the rest of the field, as mad as it sounds, you'd have to think there's a decent chance that MPs would actually see Patel as the lesser of evils, a compromise candidate. A lot depends, of course, on which MPs survive the coming whirlwind, but Patel may well be in with a chance, especially when compared to the next two on the list, Jenrick and Braverman. Now, there was a time when Jenrick was just the typical sort of corrupt Tory who helped a businessman fiddle the Treasury out of £50 million in return for a free meal. But since working as immigration minister under Braverman, they're like two peas in a pod these days. Arguably, Jenrick doesn't have the same toxic reputation amongst the public, because the public mostly have never heard of him. But I'm not sure there is anything to separate their political ideology these days. Braverman is obviously too toxic to make leader herself. It's not just that she'll be deeply off-putting to the public. She's annoyed quite a few MPs on the right of the party as well, her natural sources of support. Jenrick arguably can be a more palatable version. The fact that the public don't really know who he is can work in his favour. It means he hasn't built up a stock of unfavourability in public, and he could look like a clean slate as well. Braverman's too toxic, even as I say, for many of her natural supporters. But Jenrick is in a fight to win his seat. Polling suggests he's probably slight favourite, but it looks very tight. He may well find himself out of the running for leadership due to his constituents giving him his P45 next month. But if he survives the election, Robert Jenrick may start to look more plausible. He's willing to be just as nasty as Braverman, but much of the public don't really know who he is. Finally, there's James Cleverly. He might be able to position himself as a calm compromise candidate, but he's shown himself to be weak and lazy as well. That being said, and despite his obvious failings, he does often seem more plausible to the public than many of the others. And after that, the other potential contenders all have longer odds than Nigel Farage. This is the list of Conservative MPs who are considered by the bookies to be more likely to succeed Sunak than Farage, who is not at all likely to take over, at least not straight after Sunak, if ever. At which point you can see the reason why there are some in the Conservative Party who want Rishi Sunak to stay on as leader after the election, at least long enough for the party to have a proper post-election debate, rather than a knee-jerk reaction and picking yet another terrible leader. I think this is a vain hope. Not only will the party, I'm sure, expect Sunak to resign very quickly, I think the last thing he wants to do is hang around. All of the stress of trying to herd the Conservative Party with none of the power, I suspect we won't see his arse for dust. So what's likely to happen is the Conservatives will probably elect an abysmally unsuitable leader who will make a proper arse of things, tying themselves in knots trying to disentangle former voters from Reform UK, Labour and the Lib Dems, and failing because they all want different things. They'll then bin that one and try another, pursuing ever more ridiculous strategies and wondering why no matter how crazy the leader they pick, nothing seems to work. Because that's how I think they'll think. Conservative members and the Conservative media are really trying to set up Conservative Party members to believe that the devastating election loss which is to come is down to Sunak not being crazy enough, as opposed to being simply too weak against the crazy. So it'll be go, right, we need a crazier leader. That leader fails. They weren't crazy enough. Have we got anyone even crazier? Now, of course, much will depend on the shape of the post-election Conservative Parliamentary Party, obviously. If there's a real cull of the swivel-eyed loons and One Nation Tories do well, then maybe there's a vaguely sensible dark horse waiting to take over. But it is much more likely they go down the road of stupid evil for a while yet. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.